Hello friends, welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel. So excited for this game. Arsenal versus Man City. And I think the thing that I enjoy the most about it is going to be the tactical battle, because there's a lot of injuries. There's so many different teams that could show up and personnel that could be utilised. And they're going to offer up so much in a game that is massive. I know it's early in the season. Of course, it's not going to totally decide everything when it comes to the season. But in terms of the feeling for Arsenal and Man City moving forward, it's absolutely fascinating. And so to start off, let's concentrate on what we do know. And we're going to have a look at Arsenal's lineup. We're going to have a look at Man City's lineup. And we're going to have a look at the two together and just have a bit of fun with the tactics board here. So starting with Arsenal, what do we know about them? Well, two players that are definitely out. Both teams have got a lot of question marks on players, but two players that are definitely out, Timber and Martinelli. Timber, of course, played in the Community Shield as the left back for Arsenal in a game that they obviously did very well, got themselves the victory in the end. And Martinelli, as we know, stretches the play so much. Often when you see the average positions, he'll be well ahead of absolutely everyone else. But both of these players, sadly, will not be playing in this game. When it comes to Man City, the two players that we know will not be playing in this game. First of all, Rodri. Rodri will not be playing in this one, of course, because of the suspension that he has. The second one, just as important, and it doesn't get that much more important than these two, Rodri and De Bruyne. And that kind of gets forgotten a little bit because De Bruyne's been out for quite some time. But of course, he is not going to be available till the turn of the year. But Rodri has been so important for Man City over the last few weeks, months, years. That is a big loss going into a huge game. By the way, I have done a whole podcast talking about Arsenal versus Man City, chatting with Citizen Wayne, who is a Man City fan, and Ruben Pinder from The Athletic. And we talk about the ripple effects going into it and the ripple effects depending on the result. Arsenal winning means Arteta will never, ever become Man City manager.
Walker's been getting forward a lot more. And is that going to have a ripple effect in defence, where suddenly they're even more vulnerable to counter-attack?
I hate to say it, but I don't see a future for Calvin Phillips at City.
This is quite possibly the end of Thomas Partey playing in big games for us. Right, let's dive into this and just move the different players about. So this is the lineup for the game against Lens in midweek. Obviously, disappointing result for Arsenal. And as we've spoken about already, Martinelli not playing in this game when it comes to the best 11, or I guess that is up for debate as well. Let me know in the comments down below. This was a very strong team for Arsenal. And I think the only one change that would be very obvious to make would be Tomiyasu to come out and Ben White, of course, to come in. If that was to happen, I think the big thing and the great thing would be that Saka would be playing in this game of football. Saka came off after 34 minutes, and without Martinelli, Saka has that fantastic ability to come short at times when it's necessary, because I think Ben White attempts to provide width when he can, but isn't an out-and-out right back who's going to bomb on, like an Andrew Robertson. Obviously, he's a left back. You understand what I'm trying to say. But Saka came off in that 34th minute, and it did hurt them somewhat. And I think in terms of different players and different personnel, there are three options that you could bring in to play on this right-hand side if Saka isn't available. I think if he is available, it changes a hell of a lot. But when he came off the pitch, I thought it was really interesting to see what occurred, because the average positions really do speak volumes, because I thought Odegaard really struggled as the game went on because of exactly the fact that Saka provides so much in terms of that ability to run in behind. Let me show you the average positions from this game, because what you can see here is Saka, and as I said previously, normally you would see Martinelli on that left-hand side high up and further along. And I think you saw it with Saka here in terms of their average positions. But otherwise, in terms of the players that were involved, and Fabio Vieira, who's one of those options to play on that right-hand side to come in, there was no players really, one hugging the touchline or two going in behind. You had the likes of Gabriel Jesus, who moved about like he always does, Leandro Trossard trying to, and they were able to move up the pitch. But you had a lot of players who wanted to come short, Odegaard as well. And Odegaard is obviously an unbelievable player, but he's so ingrained in playing with Bukayo Saka and Ben White on that right-hand side. So to not have Bukayo Saka in this side, I think would be absolutely huge for Arsenal and hurt them in a massive way. So if he is unavailable or starting on the bench, how would Arsenal lineup. So it feels like there's three options for Arsenal. First up, Saka, let's say he is injured for this game. And again, obviously we will find out and we'll have a look at the different roads that you could go down. I think, first of all, as I say, White will come in for Tomiyasu. If Saka has to go out, you have a couple of options. You have Vieira, you have Reece Nelson, or you have Jesus, and you play Nketiah through the middle. Now, the big question here, and I'd love to know how people feel about this, is do you want to be able to have the best parts in the best positions? How many changes do you truly want to make? And how important / how much of a drop-off is there by having Gabriel Jesus not in the centre of the forward line? I think that's a really interesting question that I'd love to know what you guys think. Obviously, he's played on the left and offers a different kind of spark to someone like Trossard, but Trossard is a fantastic player who can play on that left-hand side, of course. He offers so much in terms of the energy that he provides through the middle. But on the right-hand side, when you have other options like Nketiah, who's obviously in the squad, but I don't think he's ever scored against Manchester City. He's only got 2 goals so far this season. Overall, it's not ideal. And in that podcast on the Ripple Effect, I think I'm actually a little bit harsh on Arsenal because I feel like with the players that have been missing for Man City and the form overall in terms of results, you feel like it's an amazing opportunity for Arsenal at home to go and beat them. But when I look at Arsenal, if Saka is not playing in this game, I think you have to take away the sort of favourites tag from Arsenal in this one. So focusing on this right-hand side, if you play Jesus through the middle, let's start off with that, and Nketiah comes out, so you've got something off the bench. You play someone like Vieira. The problem with Vieira would be, and to a point, Nelson, for me, is that you're going to have someone who's actually, he's a bit more comfortable on this side, and he want to kind of cut in. Has he got the ability to stay high and stay wide? Vieira is going to do the utter opposite, and I think he's going to get in the way of someone like Odegaard, which could be to the detriment of the whole flow of this Arsenal team. So I think for me, I do play Gabriel Jesus on this right-hand side. If you go back a couple of years, of course, he's played on that left-hand side. He likes to drop short and get on the ball when he's playing as a centre forward. But in terms of having the capability to drive in behind and to offer up that width, I think he has that capability in him to do a job for the team as a one-off game. Of course, Man City has played as that right-sided forward as well. So he can definitely do that. And I feel like in terms of retaining the general flow of the team and to offer up width and pace in behind, what I'm really struggling with this Arsenal team is that there is a lack of pace. And I understand a desire to have control, but if you don't have pace out wide, I don't think you're going to be able to hurt Man City in transition. Trossard, great dribbler, is able to take players out of the game, great quality as well in terms of being able to maybe get a goal for the team. But I think just having someone with that little bit of out-and-out pace would be really, really important for Arsenal. So for me, I think I would put Jesus on that right-hand side to start the game. Another thing to talk about is Thomas Partey. So Thomas Partey, in terms of those players that are sort of 50-50 right now, do you bring him into this team? And do you focus on a midfield that looks to return somewhat to that idea of what happened in that Community Shield game? Because what might occur here is that you could take someone like Havertz out of the side. And actually also, I think importantly, Havertz could be an option as a centre forward as well for the team and allow Rice to play as that 8. What he did brilliantly in the game against Man City in the Community Shield was that he essentially had this whole area of the pitch and dealt with it from a defensive point of view. And I thought he did absolutely brilliantly. And to do that against Man City, it then allowed Thomas Partey to focus on this right-hand side, which is how they played a lot of the game. And overall, you've got both sides dealt with 2 really good defensive minds that don't allow then those spaces in between to be infiltrated and to hurt the opposition. So I think there's another really good road that you could go down. And I think Declan Rice has got a huge, huge part to play in this game if they do go down this road. I really wouldn't be surprised to see this. What it would lead to is a very congested midfield area But I think regardless, actually, especially with someone like Trossard who might want to make that run inside as well as outside, it could be one where he then gets involved and it allows Zinchenko, who again, in terms of offering up the width for the team, if you've got Rice and you've got Partey and you don't have Jurien Timber, I think normally when you don't play Partey and you play a single pivot, Zinchenko will step in and you would have a back three that can go and do that. I think with Zinchenko inevitably starting in this game, I think there may be a different role for him if you were wanting to bring in Thomas Partey. You give Declan Rice that different role where he can still be fantastic and world-class to a point, right? But it would just be a different identity for him in comparison to the last few weeks. I think that is a really good team. And I think it could be one where Thomas Partey would come in to allow a little bit more flow, but you've still got a ball carrier there and someone who defensively can deal with that whole left-hand side of the pitch. Because I think both in transition and in the central areas, Arsenal have got to be careful. Arsenal got to be a little bit careful. Let's move on to Man City and how they could set up. This is their setup from the game in midweek against Leipzig. Could be some changes for them as well because first and foremost, of course, Rodri will have to come out of the team. So that's a big thing to start off with. Akanji actually kind of played in midfield. And if we look at their average positions, we can see that they actually... the thing with them is that they play with a back line, but that back line will then step into midfield. It's absolutely fantastic when you look at the average positions. You can see it here that, look, you got Ruben Dias sitting at the back there, almost as like a back one. And then the likes of Rodri, of course, Akanji was playing alongside him. Kyle Walker looking to get forward a little bit, but Gvardiol as well. Look at that. Ready to drive forward with the ball. But I think what's interesting here is, does Pep Guardiola smell blood a little bit if Saka is not in the side? Because they can really get at the opposition obviously being Arsenal, because they probably won't have that fear of getting done by pace through the back line. I think this game is going to be won and lost in the centre of midfield. And I do fear that these two teams are going to cancel each other out a little bit. Going back to that lineup then, because again, so many different changes that you could offer up here. Because there's first of all, if you think of the 3-2-5, right? Now, John Stones and Bernardo Silva. Bernardo Silva played 87 minutes in this game against Leipzig over on this right-hand side. John Stones was on the bench but didn't play. Massive question for the comments. Man City fans, talk to me. Does John Stones come into this team? Or does Akanji stay in that midfield role? But who will be the second midfielder? You would imagine, of course, I think he was kept in cotton wool somewhat. Kovacic would come into this lineup. And so then you've got a decision to make when it comes to Akanji and someone like Gvardiol, if you were to play John Stones to provide that little bit of physicality for the team. Obviously, there's other decisions to be made as well. Julian Alvarez came on, scored a goal. He's been fantastic. Played in that game in the Community Shield earlier in the season. You would expect him to come in. So there's so many debates here. So let's kind of go back a little bit and work our way through the team. Because if it's a 3-2-5... you have a decision to make here when it comes to someone like Rico Lewis, who maybe provides a little bit more control, a bit more defensive ability there. You could also, if you wanted to, go to a 4-2-3-1, which is what Man City have been doing a lot this season. We'll come back to that. Let me take Lewis out for a second. In terms of a 3-2-5, I think he would lean towards Gvardiol, which sounds insane, I know. But Akanji, I think, is just so trusted. He's been there that little bit longer if they were wanting to play this 3-2-5. And as I say, we'll have a look at it all together in a second. But if it's a 3-2-5, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw John Stones coming into this game and getting involved. It's a massive baptism of fire. It's a bit of a risk. And again, if you don't want to take that risk, maybe you play Akanji and you play Gvardiol and you keep Stones out of it. Maybe you put Akanji there, you take Gvardiol out, you keep Stones out of the 11 and you play Lewis. The thing I struggle with there is, especially in a 3-2-5, is physicality-wise, that's a pretty lightweight team. And then if we move up the pitch, and I think he will go to Stones. I actually think he will, and I think he'll play Akanji. Or is Akanji or Stones there? I think he wants that physicality against this team. Certainly with the midfield that Arsenal could well put forward. So if you do play a 3-2-5, you've then got some big decisions to make here. And it could be Alvarez, who I would expect to come back in. I think you might have Foden and Silva. And now Foden's played when it's a 4-2-3-1, which I'll show you in a second. But with this 3-2-5, I think him having some fun with Foden and Silva will definitely play in this game. The big question is, does Foden play out here and Silva play here? Or, like, I guess, the game against Newcastle, does Foden play in a more central area? I'm going to show you this in just a second, because this is what I find is so fascinating. It's going to get pretty congested in that midfield area. But in terms of those sort of shuttle runners, I think Foden and Silva could really have some fun against Arsenal here. Alvarez, I think you've got to play him in a game like this. If you're looking for that little bit more defensive control and having a bit more pace out wide, is it Silva who plays in that area there? As I said, if you want to be that little bit more defensive, you could bring in someone like Rico Lewis. And I think if we move it forward a little bit more and we think about a 4-2-3-1, which is what they have been doing regularly, it could be one where you have Diaz and let's have a Kanji in there for now, but you might want someone like Rico Lewis here. You might want Stones and Kovacic, and you could have Lewis as a left back for the side, especially if you're not as concerned. Again, this is the cat and mouse of it all. I would expect Saka to play just because I think they'll find a way for him to do it, even if he's 75%. And if you do that, does Rico Lewis want to be up against him, or do you want to bet someone who's going to be better in those one-on-one duels? I think that's what they would lean towards. But if they did want to go down this road, then you could see Foden out wide here to offer up that little bit more pace, or you could even see someone like Foden drop to the bench. I'd be surprised. I think Grealish, he's going to play on that left-hand side. I think he would trust him. I'd be surprised if he didn't do that. But what you would have with Lewis is that ability to move Kovacic up and, again, look to have control as a team. But out of possession, of course, having that back four to rely on. Again, it might be one where you look to have someone like, if you wanted more energy in that little rat that is Silva, do you do this and put Foden out wide to offer up that pace? Of course, Doku we need to discuss as well, and we will do right now. So many different options. I hope you're enjoying this. If you are enjoying it, hit the like button. If you're not, forgive me. But I just think there's so many different ways that this team can play. Let's have a look at the two teams together then, because it's so hard to decide how this game's going to finish up in terms of the starting lineups and, of course, how it will end as well. But for me, I think this is where we will find ourselves. The thing that I keep getting confused about, and here's the wild card for me, is I feel like in terms of matchups, right? In terms of matchups, I feel like Zinchenko and who he will be up against from a defensive point of view is a really big one here. Because in terms of the game, so much cancelling out to a point, because I think these are two great defensive sides, will be done within the penalty boxes. Because you've got so many players who like to sort of step into those areas and get involved. And especially if Havertz was to come out, Thomas Partey was to play, which I think I lean towards this idea more and more the more I think about it, then Zinchenko becomes a really, really interesting element in it. Because I think in transition, that's where Man City could go down a road where you may drop Foden. And you may just want, and I guess it's more of a when instead of if. But Doku against Zinchenko as a matchup, for me, I think is absolutely fascinating. Can Zinchenko deal with Doku if he is able to get the ball? Because I think overall, there feels like a gentle lack of natural width. Because I think inherently Zinchenko's become a player that likes to come in and get involved. Now, he probably won't do that. Because I think he will be given the idea of going, okay, you're an out-and-out left-back in this game, and you need to be concerned with the winger, whoever that winger may be. And I think they can rely upon someone like Declan Rice to do so much work on this left-hand side to help the team. I think, look, if Partey doesn't play in this game, Declan Rice obviously sits there. Zinchenko would then start to step in, and it might be one where Gabriel goes off to do that job. And maybe he's okay in doing that. But in terms of that starting position, Zinchenko's in a better place to sort of just play a back four. And I think that's kind of what they will lean towards. I think Rice will come in and play on that left-hand side. I think Partey comes in for a game like this. Because I think overall, I don't think they want overloads in those midfield areas. I think Man City more and more are concerned with the centre of the pitch, and I think at times that can allow them to hurt the opposition by getting into this zone 14 and able to thread those balls into Haaland, be it Silva or Alvarez. We've seen what Alvarez can do in terms of the goals that he can score from outside the box. And that's why, Haaland then can just be a bit more of an advanced forward, looking to push all the time. And I think what's going to happen, if we're honest, is this. And Kovacic will kind of maybe look to get involved at times. Ben White will be there. Grealish will do his thing. Odegaard will then have to work. Odegaard will do a lot of work on this right-hand side, but he'll be given that little bit more freedom because Thomas Partey will be there looking to help out. And then Saka, I think I expect him to play. But if he doesn't play, that's where I'm just struggling to see Arsenal getting a victory out of this game, because whoever you bring in, let's say it's Jesus and Nketiah starts, I think that allows Man City to squeeze because they're not concerned about the pace in behind really of them. And if it gets tight like that, I think that little zip at different moments, I think would lead to two things. Either defensively, Stones and Kovacic getting caught out at one moment in time. But in terms of those matchups, Odegaard's got to do something special. And I just feel like Trossard and Nketiah and Jesus is going to be a lot of people coming back instead of playing on that final line. And I don't think Nketiah will do the business. I think Jesus will attempt to, but I think Akanji is just pretty special. Maybe there's a lapse in concentration from these midfield too, and the loss of Rodri could be huge for them. And I think in terms of that long-range passing that Rodri provides, you're losing something there, of course. But I also think in little snapshot moments, again, look, you could do this and you could bring Foden back in. And I understand I'm making so many changes here. I think there will be a moment when they're able to thread the ball through. I think there will be those little moments or that crossing on the outside. But then again, I come back to it. That's why I think you play Partey and Rice, because that's two world-class defensive midfielders or defensively minded players that can shut down so many things. It's a fascinating game of football, and I'm intrigued to see who can stand out here. I would imagine that it feels like, to me, in terms of quality to win the game, the standout players for me, Alvarez, Foden, Silva, Grealish. I think Rice is a huge game to play. Defensively, Partey's got a huge game to play. Odegaard needs to step up because that front line looks weak in comparison to what you would really love to see, which is obviously the likes of Martinelli and Saka in this side. It's going to be really congested. It's going to be a real tactical battle. I think Doku could have a huge part to play in the latter stages of the game, but I almost think you kind of keep your powder dry and bring him on in the second half, because I don't think that space will be there in the first half. So there you have it. Loads of thoughts. I thought it was a huge opportunity for Arsenal. Now I'm not so sure. I think this ends in a draw after all that, because I think the home advantage for Arsenal will be massive in this one. But Man City, despite the huge losses of Rodri in particular and De Bruyne, have some incredible players and great defensive stability. Very tough game. I think it might end in a draw, or Man City might just sneak it 2-1 because of that little bit more electricity and pace. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, a bit more chilled out, utilising the lovely tactics board that we have this season, then let me know in the comments down below what your prediction is. What are your lineups? Where's the game going to be won? And of course, crucially, subscribe to the channel. But actually, before all of that, make sure you check out the video about Wolves and Man City, because in that you can see a blueprint, because Arsenal got a lot of these great elements. But if you want to really know how you get yourself into a position where you can hurt Man City, then that's the video you need to check out. It's right there. Go and click on it.